Welcome to Q&As. I'm delighted today to be introducing Marguerite Church as my guest, and I'm your host, Marcia Boyles. We're going to be talking today about self-publishing, and particularly those of you here at Greenspring who are interested in writing your memoirs. Marguerite has written 2 of them now, and so we'll be talking about publishing your memoirs or publishing anything else you might have written. So with that, Marguerite, welcome.
Thank you.
We're going to talk a little bit, I think, in the beginning about your first book. And a number of folks here have bought it and read it.
I think a lot of people have bought it and read it, and it's been passed around and loaned around to everybody. So I think a lot of people are familiar with it.
Marguerite, we actually have it up here, and I think we have a picture of the cover as well. Tell us the title of this.
The title is Adopted the Chinese Way.
All right, and it's about your early life in China.
Yes, and it's entitled Adopted the Chinese Way because I felt that that would be the most interesting to the public in general, and it'd be something that people didn't know about.
And there are 26 chapters in that book? 27?
I think there are actually 30.
Are there 30 now? So it took us about 30 months.
Yes, it did.
For
One
that
chapter
particular
a month.
book.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a fun process. We critiqued, and you just kept bringing wonderful chapters every month. Now let's talk a little bit about before we get into the actual publishing portion of this, let's talk about the writing portion. I mean, that of course is the creative aspect. Your new memoir, if you don't mind my summarizing it, is really a continuation of your life, but after you arrived in the United States as a college student.
Right.
And your work in the CIA, your 2 marriages,
Yes.
Your children, your travels. It again is a wonderfully interesting book, spanning 2 cultures, the Chinese culture and the American culture.
Spanning 2 cultures and spanning 70 years.
And spanning 70 years.
Right.
Wow.
From the time I left China in 1945 to my 90th birthday in 2015.
Well, I think 30 chapters for 70 years is pretty good. Pretty concise.
Right.
All right. That's excellent. What a good point. All right. I think we have the book cover for your new book. Tell us the title.
It's called The Richness of My Yesterdays.
The Richness of My Yesterdays. All right. Well, it's an excellent book. Tell us again now about the process of writing it. How did you begin? How did you know how to put it together? How did you do this?
That's it's a difficult question.
Yes, it is.
With the first book, it was so easy because I knew what I wanted to do. I just wanted to tell my children all about my childhood because my children are so very American, even though ethnically they are Chinese, but they are American. And they didn't even think of what their mother's life was like. They think of me as being just as American as they. And so I felt very strongly that they needed to know something about my background and their heritage, if you want to call it that.
So that was the impetus for you writing that first book.
Yes, that got me started. I felt I needed to tell them what my life was like. And they knew that I was adopted, but they had no idea about the circumstances of the adoption. They didn't have any idea of the complexities of a large Chinese family, the relationships within the family, and they certainly had no idea what it was like to have a concubine within the household.
I dare say. Now, Marguerite, let's talk about the second book.
Yeah.
in terms of the process of writing that?
The second book was totally different. As you know, Marcia, I would, I really wasn't prepared to write a second book at all, except my husband had died, and I was I was down in a hole of depression, and you came along and asked me if I would like to join a creative writing class, and I thought, this will give me something to occupy my time to fill the gap that was left by the loss of my husband. So I joined your class.
I have to, let me just stop for a minute and say that I have seen this happen in many, many instances, and it happened to me as well.
Yeah.
That writing memoirs, whether they're a group of short ones or a whole book, probably does more for treating depression than anything I can think of. It's a wonderfully creative process. I think you get closure on old memories. It really is a wonderful thing for those of us.
And so many of us, particularly at Green Spring, we don't have that much of a future to look to. So we're looking backwards, and I think it's wonderful to enjoy our past.
It is wonderful. I quite agree. I think there's tremendous pleasure in going back and looking and putting it down on paper.
Well, I had a hard time deciding what to call this book, but then I remembered from the very last line of my book was, I am thankful for the richness of my memories. And that's not the very last line, but close to the last line. And I picked up on that as a title. Yeah.
Well, the process, now you were doing a chapter a month, which is actually a pretty good clip, I would say. I mean, we're talking maybe 10 pages, something like that, on average.
Yeah.
8 or 10 pages. How do you do that? Did you write every day? Did you write when the Spirit moved you?
I did not write every day. If I did not have an appointment with you, Marcia, I probably would not have written at all. And it was always the last week, just before getting to meet with you and Betsy, that I hastily got out my pen and pencil or my computer and started writing.
I see. So you're fessing up that this was last minute. All right. That I didn't really know. All right. Well, clearly everybody does it differently. Some folks write every day. Some folks write when the Spirit moves them. But in your case, it was because we were going to meet. We met at the end of every month.
And I was very glad to have that appointment, because otherwise I would have let it slide again and again.
Well, I think it's true. I mean, we all procrastinate, and when we need to have it done, then we get it done. All right. Did you enjoy the process, Marguerite?
I really did. I really did. And it was really hard, though, to decide what to put in and what to leave out. Because even though it's 30 chapters, you can't really get 70 years into that. No, you can't.
I think you're absolutely right that what you leave out is just as significant as what you put in some ways.
I think so. Well, you and Betsy were a big help on that, because in some instances I had written things that you did not feel belonged in that chapter, and you would tell me so.
And in some cases we urged you to elaborate on something that we thought was interesting and that your family would enjoy.
But I think what is so difficult is deciding what is going to be interesting, because even though it's just a memoir of your own life, and it's for your children, but you don't want it to be boring. And I remember my husband could be very blunt, and he read the memoir of my daughter-in-law's father, and he said to her, "This is boring." And I don't think, even if you're writing for your children, you don't want it to be boring.
Absolutely not. We talk a little bit in my classes about the difference between an autobiography and a memoir, and the memoir being stories with a point. And I think, we want to make them interesting, we want to make them vivid, and yes, we don't want them to be boring. The autobiography, where it's loaded with facts, my parents were married on such and such a date, and here's the birth certificate. or here's the marriage certificate, I think can be boring. That's one approach to do it in very dry chronological order. But I think the stories are the things that are really interesting. I mean, don't you, rather than all the facts and figures?
Yes, I think so. And there's where it's difficult to decide what to put in.
Yes.
Because I can think of so many things now that I wish that I
That you had put in. Oh, that's
I
interesting.
wish that I had put in, and it's too late. So, you know, what do? You can never be satisfied.
No, that's true.
You're never satisfied.
Well, certainly one of the things when we talk about publishing, it is all so much easier these days with a computer. When I've had two books published, and in both cases, I had to type them. And let me tell you, the typing is no fun. Of course, you submitted the typewritten copy to the publisher, and they, you know, put them, they typeset them. Now, in your case, we're talking about self-publishing, which is different than a commercial trade publisher. Tell us, Marguerite, number one, about how you picked your publisher and what that publisher expects in the way of your copy.
Okay. Well, I picked the publisher for my first book, which is the same one that I used later on. When I chose it, it was because print-on-demand publishing was just beginning to really get traction. And I looked at 3 at the time. One was Ex Libris, one was Trafford. I think that was out of Canada. There weren't that many at that time.
There are
now.
There
are a lot now.
Yes.
But this one was Infinity Publishing was the only one that would let me format my own book.
Oh, it was?
Yes. The others wanted you to submit it in Word, and they would do the formatting. So
now there's a lot more flexibility.
And yes, and they wouldn't, the others would not, they would put all the pictures.
Well, that's
in
okay
a group.
because it's all changed since then.
So,
all right, so tell me what Infinity expects.
Infinity, what they, I was very happy with the publication of this first one.
It looks great.
I did the formatting entirely myself. But the second one, I chose to go with them again.
Putting in the pictures, Margaret, excuse me for interrupting.
Yes, I did everything, including the sketches and the little call-outs, they call them, and all that.
Did they design the cover?
I gave them the picture and told them roughly what I wanted.
That's a wonderful cover.
So I was happy with it, except for the fact that my shoes have not been polished. And I couldn't understand, why in a well-to-do family they hadn't polished my shoes for Chinese New Year. So, but anyway, the second book, I chose to go with them because I'd been so satisfied the first time. What they expect is you submit the whole thing in Word. They will you can do the formatting yourself, or they will format for you. There's no difference in the charge.
Oh, there isn't?
No. I wanted to, I really didn't want to format myself, but my daughter-in-law kept on saying, if you don't do it yourself, it's going to be all botched up and so on. So I did most of it myself. But then I got stymied on the fact that I wanted, at the headers, I wanted the title on one side and the chapter title on the other side, and I didn't know how that was going to fit with the pages. And so I called them and asked them if it would be all right if I submitted it partially self-formatted, and they said there would be no problem and they would take care of it. Also on the pictures, they said that I could wrap them, I could do anything with I wanted with them. If they did the sizing and the cropping and the positioning of the picture, it would be $10 per picture.
$10 a picture.
And there are 52 in there, so you can see that would have been a cost.
Yes, it would have. I think a lot of people have, even pretty computer savvy folks, have some trouble with pictures. You know, we're just not
True.
used to doing that.
True. Well, nowadays, again, with the computer, though, it is so
Right.
much easier.
Right. Oh my goodness.
But
yes.
even so,
Mhm.
where I had positioned them correctly, when the final proof came back, many of them were in the wrong place. Like the picture
they
would
were?
be before the text. So, yeah.
Oh,
So I
that,
had to,
okay. All right, so, all right. So you submitted it in Word, and
Yeah.
you did most of the formatting.
Yeah.
And you put, and the placement of the pictures.
Yes.
All right. So, that was fine, and they come back then in the form of proofs.
They come back in the form of an e-proof. In the
Oh,
old
they're
days,
e-proofs.
when I did the first one, I got a hard copy proof.
Yes. And
This
these
time
are all
they-
e-proofs.
They send you, everything is done by email.
Mhm.
They send you an e-proof, and
As an
on
attachment,
the proof,
email attachment?
every line has a number beside it. And then you have a master correction sheet on which you write, there's several columns. One column is for the line it's on, the line that the error is on, and the word that is incorrect, and the word that it should be.
Oh, well, now that
So,
makes it sort of simple,
It's
doesn't
quite
it?
easy, because you could
Yes.
take, say, the mistake was on line 254,
Right.
and the word was capital, and they had spelled it wrong, or I had spelled it
All
wrong.
right.
And it would give you,
That's
and you
very-
could
all
do a
right.
whole sentence too. If
Uh-huh.
you
Oh, you
sentence them.
could,
Yes.
or even a paragraph.
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. That certainly makes it simple. I had no
Yeah,
idea they
so-
did that. Are they sending it as an email attachment?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And after the
Did you
first
print
proof.
it out?
Pardon?
Did you print it out?
No, I
Or
didn't.
did
print
you
it
do
out.
it, you actually
No.
proofed it online?
I proofed it online.
Uh-huh,
Yes.
all right.
But another.
Marguerite, let me ask you about copy editing, all the
Oh, that's a
commas
good
and
s-
grammar and such.
Yes.
Who does that?
Well, I'm very fortunate, because I have a friend who I used to play tennis with, who was a copy editor for the Department of Agriculture.
Oh, really?
They
That was fortunate.
actually sent her to copy editing classes or whatever they were called. So she volunteered to do my first book when she heard I was writing a book.
Well,
And so she did my second
There are
one.
very few errors, certainly in your first one. What would you, if the average person wanted somebody to copy edit, would the
that's easy.
publisher be willing to do that
Oh,
for a fee?
I forgot to read that. They do have a fee for how much it is.
Right.
But I should say that in the proofing, they allow you 40 corrections at no extra charge.
Now, all right, 40 corrections. Are those errors they have made, or
No,
errors
your
that you have
own
made?
errors.
Your own errors. All right.
My errors. And I am a pretty thorough reader, and I think that I have read my text so many times that it's practically memorized. But when I went through the copy editing part of it, after my friend had already copy edited it, I had changed a lot of things, so I needed to edit it again. I thought that 40 corrections would be very generous, and I certainly wouldn't have that many. But I found 35 errors, so I was just under the 40 mark.
Where they do it for they do
free.
it free. All right.
But
Now-
then they sent me the second proof after you've corrected your
all right,
35.
let's stop for a second
Okay.
and talk about that. All right. So you have your first proofs
Yeah,
that are as an email attachment.
yeah.
All right. So you make the corrections. You indicate where. Now, did you find many errors that they had made? Placement of pictures. You're
Placement
saying.
of pictures.
Some formatting.
And something that I had not expected was they had several blank pages in between the chapters.
Oh, they did.
And
Which you did not want.
I thought they were errors at first, but it turns out I did not want the blank pages.
Right.
But it turns out that is now industry standard. Did you know that?
No, I did not. That
Because
they put.
and then after they told me that, I found a book that I was reading actually had blank pages. They
All
want
right, so
the,
that
the
has
chapter to
become-
begin on the right side.
On the right side, sure. Okay, well, that would make sense. All right, now Marguerite, you have the first you have the first proofs.
Yeah.
Now, then you've sent all the corrections back,
Right,
and you get a second set of proofs.
right.
And that also is done through email.
Also through
That's
email
not- that's
and the
not hard
same
copy.
procedure.
Same
But I
procedure.
found more mistakes.
That you had made, or that
right.
they had made?
Pardon?
Mistakes that you had made or they had made?
Mistakes I had made, very minor.
All
Things
right.
like an E left off, or a period that
Or a
had
comma,
been,
or
right,
or
or a
something.
quotation mark that hadn't been
All
put
right.
in.
So now
Very
you
minor.
finished with the second proofs,
Right.
and is that it then in the way of proofs?
And I could request a hard copy proof.
Oh, you could.
I could,
Uh-huh.
but that would have taken 2 more weeks. And even though it took me 3 years to write the thing, by this time I wanted it quickly. And
All right,
so
let's talk
I,
about the timing.
Yeah.
From the time you submitted this
Yeah.
to the publisher, to Infinity, how long has it taken you now to get through the second proofs?
I submitted the whole thing in the beginning of April. And yesterday,
Beginning of April. June. All right. So
it's
3.5 months.
3.5 months, and I placed my order for books yesterday. And they will be ready in 3 weeks. That means the beginning of August.
So 4 months.
4 months.
All
yes.
right. That's pretty quick, I would think.
I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, and partly it would depend on how quickly you got the corrections back to
Right,
them.
right.
And I assume you did that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
All right. Now, Marguerite, let's talk a little bit about costs.
Okay.
This process is called print on demand,
Yes.
POD. And what this involves is you can order any number of books at any time.
Yes.
All right. So as long as we understand that, and that is a fairly new process. Now, how many books are they going to give you, and what is the cost, the initial cost and the per book cost?
The initial cost, I think, is just wonderful. When I did the first book, it was $500 for the initial cost of printing, doing the cover, everything. Now the cost is $599, so in other words, it's $600, plus $150 for the copywriting, which is not, they don't receive that. That goes to the copyright office or whatever it is. So it's costing $650.
$750 total.
$650. No, $750. Yes, $750 total. But
All
you
right.
do not own any books.
All right. So $750 is just the flat cost before you have any books.
Yes.
All right. And then do they charge you per book?
Then they charge you per book, and I discovered on the first book that the author has no control whatsoever over what the book is going to cost. And obviously that's of great concern, because
Well,
if
is it
you want to
done-
sell your book and you want it to be
Certainly
cheap.
it's done by length, isn't it?
Pardon?
Isn't it done by length, book length?
It's done by the number of pages.
Yes.
And here I have to tell my story.
No, I think we're getting very short of time. So
Okay.
let's, Marguerite, we're down to the last couple of minutes, so we'll have to make it very concise.
Yeah.
Tell us what the per book cost was for your first book and what it's going to be for your second book.
The first book was $17.95 at 360 some pages. The second book is 290 some pages and is going to be $14.95.
All right, so they haven't actually raised their
The
per
price,
page.
I was surprised and that the price was so low.
Yes, I think that's very fair. Do you get a certain number of books free in the beginning?
I get 5 free books.
5 free books.
I
All
get
right.
5, that's all.
And any now, can you order 2 books at a time?
I can order anything I
Anything.
want.
All right.
But I get, on
it's
my
all the same
first
price.
order, I get a 50% discount.
Oh, you
So,
do?
Yes.
Uh-huh. All
On
right.
subsequent orders, the author gets a 40% discount, which is not that bad. So it's a very, I think it's a terrific deal for
right.
anybody who wants to write a memoir for their family.
Well, you know, this is all extremely helpful. I think most folks have no idea what this process involves. And I know there are consultants online that will help you with the writing. There are those who will help you with the formatting, the copy
Everything.
editing. So help is available. Certainly some help here at Green Spring is available. But Marguerite, you've done such a good job with both of these two books.
Well, I feel so good that you say that. A compliment from you means a lot.
Well, thank you. We all have just loved this first book, and the second book is equally interesting. I have
Thank
to
you.
say, having read it chapter
Thank
by
you.
chapter. Well, Marguerite, this has been so helpful and fun today. Thanks so much for coming on and being agreeable to sit and tell your story.
I have enjoyed it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us today, and we will see you next month.